10:29 a.m. Your Honor, my sister was never part of Mom's final wishes, my brother said confidently. His lawyer nodded beside him. She's not listed in the will. My brother smirked across the courtroom. It was the smirk of someone who had already counted the money and spent it. Then the judge leaned forward, adjusted his glasses, and asked one simple question. Do you have the original copy? My name is Lauren Whitaker, and I'm 35 years old. I'm a hospice nurse. I spend my working hours helping people move through the hardest days of their lives with as much dignity and comfort as possible. It's quiet work. It's emotional work. The kind that leaves marks on you that don't show on the outside. There is no applause for it. There are no bonuses or public recognition or impressive titles to put on a business card. There is just the work itself and the knowledge that you showed up when it mattered most. In my family, I was always the dependable one. The one who stayed close to home while everyone else built their lives at a safe distance from the hard parts. My older brother Daniel was the one they talked about at holidays. The ambitious one. The one who moved to the city in his 20s, started businesses, wore expensive suits, and called Mom on her birthday with updates about deals and investments that nobody fully understood but everyone found impressive. He had a way of filling a room with confidence even when the substance behind it was thin. People responded to that. They always have. When Mom got sick 2 years ago, the question of who would step up answered itself before anyone asked it out loud. I moved into her house. I reorganized my schedule around her appointments. I learned her medications well enough to catch errors the pharmacy made twice. I handled the late-night emergencies, the paperwork, the calls to insurance companies that put you on hold for 40 minutes and then transfer you to someone who can't actually help. I did all of it without being asked because it needed to be done, and I was there. Daniel visited twice that year. Both times he stayed for a weekend, brought flowers, took photographs, and left. When Mom passed, he appeared within 48 hours. Suddenly, he was everywhere, making calls, talking to lawyers, using phrases like protecting the estate and honoring her wishes in the same tone he used when pitching business ideas. He moved through the grief like it was a transaction he needed to close before the month ended. I wasn't wealthy. I didn't have a city apartment or a suit that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. But I had something Daniel had never accounted for in any of his calculations. I knew exactly what Mom wanted. I knew because I was the one sitting beside her when she said it, in her own voice, in her own words, in the quiet of her house during the long months when it was just the two of us. If you've ever been the person who showed up for your family while someone else stood at a comfortable distance and then stepped forward to take the credit when it was over, you already understand everything about where this story is going. Subscribe if you believe loyalty should count for something. Have you ever been pushed aside when family decisions were being made, despite being the one who did the actual work? Tell me in the comments. Click hype if you believe the truth always finds its way out eventually. Let's go. 2 months after the funeral, Daniel called me to say the will was being finalized. His tone was careful, organized, the tone of someone who has rehearsed a conversation. I drove to the lawyer's office, assuming we would divide things the way Mom had always talked about. The house was modest. The savings were modest. There were sentimental items worth more in memory than in dollars. I wasn't expecting anything dramatic. I was expecting a straightforward process handled by people behaving like adults who had just lost their mother. Daniel was already seated when I arrived. His lawyer sat beside him with a leather folder on the table. The room smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner and the particular kind of formal stillness that collects in rooms where important papers live. Daniel's lawyer opened the folder and placed a document on the table. My name was not on it. I read it twice. Then I looked up. Mom would never cut me out, I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. Daniel shrugged with the casual ease of someone who had prepared for exactly this reaction. Maybe she'd change her mind. He explained that Mom had updated the will 6 months before she died. The lawyer confirmed the document appeared valid. Signatures were present. Dates were present. Everything was in order according to the paperwork in front of us. 6 months before she died, I had been living in her house. I had been with her nearly every day. I had driven her to appointments and sat in waiting rooms and held her hand during procedures she was frightened of. I had been there every single day for months, and I had never once heard her mention changing anything about her will. I asked why she would have done it without telling me. Daniel's answer arrived without hesitation. Maybe she didn't trust you with money. He said it quietly, almost gently, like a door closing. The humiliation didn't stay in that room. It traveled. Cousins began calling each other. Whispers moved through the extended family that maybe I had pressured Mom during her illness. That maybe living with her had given me influence I had used improperly. People who had known me my entire life began treating me with a careful distance, weighing my words before responding, the way people do when they're deciding what to believe. Daniel filed a formal legal petition to confirm the will. I was forced into a courtroom just to defend my right to be acknowledged by my own mother. His lawyer announced at the first hearing that they had the final will. He said it with the confidence of someone holding all the cards. Daniel sat beside him and looked at me across the room with an expression that told me he had already decided how this ended. What followed happened in 3 distinct waves, and each one landed harder than the last. Daniel told family members that I had manipulated Mom during her care. He positioned himself as the responsible executor, the son who had stepped in to protect his mother's true wishes from someone who had taken advantage of proximity and vulnerability. He said it with just enough restraint to sound credible rather than vindictive. People who wanted a simple explanation found one in his version. In court, his lawyer stated that Mom had felt pressured living with me, that the environment had not been conducive to her making free and independent decisions. I sat in that courtroom and heard those words applied to the 2 years I had given to caring for her, and I felt something go very still inside me. Not anger. Something quieter and colder than anger. I had reorganized my entire life around her comfort and her safety and her dignity, and now that sacrifice was being reframed as evidence of manipulation. I stayed calm. I kept my face neutral. I took notes on a legal pad, and I did not give Daniel or his lawyer the reaction they were watching for. The third pressure came from the legal process itself. Daniel's team pushed for a quick ruling. They argued there was no reasonable basis to question the document. They wanted this resolved before anyone had time to look too closely at anything. The speed of their confidence bothered me more than the confidence itself. People who have nothing to hide don't usually need things to move this fast. I went home that evening and sat at my kitchen table and opened the binder I had kept during Mom's care. I went through it slowly and carefully for the first time since she passed. Something about Daniel's document felt wrong. I needed to find out exactly what it was. The binder was a simple thing. A blue 3-ring binder I had bought at a drugstore and used to organize Mom's medical information during her illness. Appointment logs, medication schedules, insurance correspondence, notes from doctor visits with questions written in the margins. The practical paperwork of keeping someone alive and cared for. Mom had asked me to store some of her personal documents safely during a stretch when she was worried about losing track of important papers. I had placed them in the back section of the binder without reading them carefully at the time. There had been no reason to examine them closely. She was alive. They were hers. I was just keeping them safe. I found the photocopy near the back. A copy of the will she had signed 2 years earlier, the original executed before her illness progressed significantly. I read it carefully under the kitchen light. In that version, Mom divided everything equally between us. The house, the savings, the personal items, split down the middle, clearly stated, dated, and signed with the attorney's signature present. I placed it beside the document Daniel had submitted, and I compared the two. The attorney's signature date on Daniel's version did not match the date on the original. The clause removing me entirely had been written in language that was slightly different from the surrounding text in a way that was subtle, but present if you were looking for it. I had found what I needed. Now I needed someone to help me use it correctly. Rachel called me on a Tuesday evening about a week before the next hearing. Rachel was the cousin nobody invited to lead the family prayer at Thanksgiving. She asked inconvenient questions and remembered things people preferred she forget. In another family, she might have been called honest. In ours, she was called difficult. She told me that Daniel had contacted her several months before Mom passed. He had asked, in a casual roundabout way, whether Rachel happened to know where Mom kept her important legal documents. He framed it as wanting to make sure things were organized in case they were ever needed. Rachel had thought the question seemed strange at the time but hadn't said anything because she couldn't identify exactly what bothered her about it. She could identify it now. She agreed to testify about the conversation. Daniel walked into the next hearing smiling. He greeted people in the corridor outside the courtroom with the ease of a man attending an event he had already won. His lawyer carried the leather folder with the same settled confidence as before. They had decided the shape of this outcome, and they were simply waiting for the official confirmation. Rachel sat in the back row of the courtroom and said nothing to anyone. Daniel's lawyer presented the supposed final will to the judge with the smooth efficiency of someone who had done this many times and expected no complications. The judge studied the document in silence. The courtroom was very quiet. I could hear the ventilation system running somewhere above the ceiling tiles. I could hear the sound of paper being turned. Then the judge looked up. "Where is the original document?" Daniel's lawyer replied that the copy before the court should be sufficient for the purposes of the hearing. The judge's expression didn't change. He stated clearly that for a document of this nature, with the stakes involved, he required the original for verification purposes. He asked again, "Where was the original?" Daniel shifted slightly in his seat. "Just slightly. Just enough." My lawyer stood and requested permission to submit a document for the court's consideration. The judge nodded. The blue binder photocopy was placed before him. He looked at both documents together for a long moment. His finger moved slowly across the signature lines, across the dates, across the specific clause that removed my name entirely. "These signatures appear identical," he said carefully. He paused. "Except for the altered clause." His lawyer leaned forward, which removed Ms. Whitaker entirely. Rachel was called to testify. She described Daniel's inquiry about Mom's legal documents in a quiet, measured voice. She answered every question directly. She did not elaborate beyond what she had actually witnessed. She didn't need to. The pressure in the room changed. I felt it shift the way air pressure shifts before weather arrives. Daniel's lawyer requested a brief recess. The judge denied it. The court ordered a formal forensic review of both documents. The examination confirmed what the dates and signatures had already suggested. The document Daniel presented had been modified after Mom signed it. The clause removing me had been added after the fact. The original will, the one sitting in my blue binder from a drugstore, reflected what Mom had actually intended. Daniel sat very still as the judge addressed him directly. The confident posture he had carried into every room connected to this case had left him completely. He looked smaller without it. The courtroom was silent in a way that felt final. The court rejected Daniel's altered document and reinstated the original will in full. Mom's estate was divided exactly as she had intended. The house, the savings, the personal items she had spent a lifetime accumulating, split equally, the way she had decided before anyone tried to revise her decision on her behalf. Daniel faced legal consequences for submitting a tampered document. His lawyer withdrew from the case shortly afterward. The process that followed was handled by the court without further input from him. Family members reached out over the following weeks. The calls and messages were careful and slightly formal, the way apologies are when people aren't entirely sure how much they owe. I accepted them without making anyone feel worse than they already did. That wasn't the point. The damage between Daniel and me was permanent. I understood that clearly and without particular emotion. Some things break in ways that don't have repairs, not because the people involved refused to try, but because the foundation was revealed to be something other than what everyone believed it was. You can't rebuild on that. You can only acknowledge it and move in a different direction. I walked out of the courthouse on the day of the final ruling into an ordinary afternoon. Traffic moving. People on their phones. The sky the same color it had been when I walked in. I didn't feel victorious. Victory implies a competition you wanted to be part of. I had never wanted any of this. What I felt was relief. Plain and simple and deep. The relief of a thing being settled correctly. Because in the end, the money was never what this was about. It was about whether my mother's actual voice would be heard or whether someone else's version of it would replace her. It was about whether 2 years of quiet, Unwitnessed devotion counted for anything when someone with a leather folder and a confident lawyer decided it was convenient to pretend it hadn't happened. It counted. The binder in my kitchen proved it counted. And Mom's real wishes, the ones she had made in her own time with her own hand, were the ones that stood. If someone in your family ever tried to manipulate a will or control an inheritance in a way that wasn't fair, you already know how that particular betrayal sits differently from other kinds. It isn't just about property or money. It's about being told that what you gave didn't matter, that you can be erased from a story you lived inside. Share your story in the comments. Have you ever had to fight to defend your place in your own family? Subscribe if you believe fairness should be the floor, not the ceiling. Click hype to help this story find someone who needs to hear it today. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and click hype to help it reach more people who need to hear it. Your voice matters here. Share your own experience in the comments below. I read every single one.